Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar on the 2021 Dental Online Presence Benchmark Report. We'll get started in just a minute or two. I can see we've still got a good number of people logging in, and so we want to give them a chance to get settled, and then we'll get started. Thanks. All right, everyone. Thanks for waiting. Still some logging in. We'll go ahead and get started and at least address some of the housekeeping stuff right up front. So with that said, I want to officially welcome you to the session today. So it's a mouthful of a title, but it's all important. We're taking a look at the 2021 Dental Practice Online Presence Benchmark Report that we put together at MyAdvice from a survey of the market, and we'll talk about that today, and more importantly, some things we learned and what they mean for you as an individual, and how you think about your online presence with regard to growing the practice, attracting new patients. So hopefully you get some really good insights out of this. Before we get too far into the content, just a quick introduction. This is me. I'm Justin Everett. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at MyAdvice. Some background on me. So I'm in year 17 of helping small businesses communicate with their customers and with their patients. And for me, it's mostly been in a technology background, different technologies that you might use in the practice there. And it's everything across what I would consider the patient journey, everything from marketing the business and the practice and acquiring new patients to notifications around appointments. I've worked with companies that do appointment reminder software, things like that, and then ultimately ongoing retention types of communication. So I'm excited to share with you guys today and hopefully put some of my perspective on some of these findings that we found by interviewing you and surveying you. So this should be hopefully interesting. Also, just some other housekeeping stuff. So first of all, there's not a slide for this, but I'll tell you, this is being recorded and we'll plan to share that with you. So if you have to jump off for whatever reason, totally understand. This is interactive, so we want you to ask any questions you have or chat as time allows. We'll get to that. And you see here on the screen, but hopefully you see in your GoToWebinar control panel as well, there's a questions tool and a chat tool. They both kind of work the same. So if there's anything you want to ask or any comment you want to make, please put it in there. And that way, even if we can't get to it live on the session, we can certainly follow up with you afterwards if it's something that's maybe a little more in depth for your specific situation. That tends to work pretty well in my experience. And then, again, it's interactive. We'll have a couple of poll questions, and I hope you'll participate in those. And while we've done a market survey, or an analysis of practices overall, there are about 100 of us registered for this session here now. So I'd love to poll this group and see how the smaller group maybe compares. So with that said, also the CE verification. So at the end of the session here, I will give you a code, and we'll make sure it's on the screen and give you plenty of time to copy that down. And in case you're unfamiliar with this process, you'll log into your CE Zoom account at cezoom.com. You'll find the course your dashboard, and there's a should be a verify button there that you click. You'll enter that code. There's a brief evaluation. It's just a handful of questions on the content here today that I think will be pretty straightforward, but you'll have to let me know. And then you'll be able to access your certificate after that point. So that'll be there as well. All right. Well, let's talk about what we're going to be talking about. So the agenda today. So first of all, we've kind of broken this presentation down into 6 parts. One is, why are we doing this in the first place? Why does this matter? Why did we go out and gather and analyze this data? Second, I want to make sure you understand the methodology. We're on the same page in terms of defining some of the terms I'll be, and phrases we'll be sharing here. And just, I see you have a good grip on how we pulled it together. And then we started looking at the insights. So we've, with online presence, we've really broken this chunk down into reviews and reputation management, and also local listings and directories. They're super impactful in your online presence from an SEO standpoint and a visibility standpoint when potential patients are out there searching. So once you get a feel for where we stand as an industry on that front. Then from there, some geographic insights, a little bit of a correlation, looking at busier metro areas versus more rural areas, and even this is more just for fun than anything, but a little bit of a breakdown on how different states in the country perform across some of these measures. It's just kind of a fun thing to see. So we'll get into that as well. So before we do this, I want to launch a poll question here. We're going to do 2 of them. The first one I want to know is, because we're going to be talking about patient reviews and how we stack up as an industry on that, I'd love to know from your perspective, with your own practice in mind, how would you rate the effectiveness of your patient review strategy today? And if you could take a minute just to answer that, I'd appreciate it. And we're it's just a gut feel. You're really good at this, or really not good at this, or somewhere in between. Thank you guys all for voting. It's fun to watch the numbers add up and go. We'll give everybody just a few more seconds here. So where are you at on that scale from very effective to very ineffective? All right, and I'll show you guys the results here in just a second, as soon as it closes. All right, looks like most of the votes are in here, so let's close it. Let's see, share results. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this. Pretty interesting. It sounds like as a group, we feel like we're mostly effective here. Maybe a little bit of opportunity for improvement, but doing well for the most part. Only 8% say they're ineffective from a review standpoint, but that's pretty interesting, because I think what you're going to see in the results here, I would be curious to know how you feel about this after the fact, after you see some of the data. So thanks for doing that one. I also want to launch this one just to know from your perspective, what's your average review score today, just on a 1 to 5 scale. If you don't know, you don't know, and that's interesting as well. And this will be super relevant in a moment, and just kind of remember how you answered it, because we'll share some of the data on where most people stand. All right, again, we'll give you just a few more seconds to vote here. Thanks again for taking the poll question here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this one and share these results. So where do we stack up as a group? It's kind of this smaller group that's here today. A chunk of us have a perfect 5.0, which is fantastic. Another quarter or above a 4.5 average, 4.0 to 4.5 is 16%, and no one reported they're less than a 4, which is fantastic. And as you'll see, is not out of line the insights. Little spoiler there. And then about half of us aren't sure, and that's okay. But something probably to go investigate and look at after the fact, just to understand more specifically how you stack up. So thanks again for participating right there. Let me make sure I'm sharing my slides again here. Let's see. All right. Hopefully you guys can see that now. All right, so with background, let's talk about what we did here and why. So why go in and benchmark this? Well, with all of the trends that we're seeing in consumer behavior and consumers' decision-making processes, the time is really right now to understand where we stand as an overall industry. It should come to no surprise to any of you guys that consumer research, and how they go out and research their behaviors in recent years, they've shifted increasingly online, and healthcare is no exception to that. 76% of healthcare consumers are going to search for their providers online and do that research, and it's a really convenient, efficient thing for them to do. Two of the elements that are highly influential in that ecosystem, that online research ecosystem, are reviews and local search. And so that's why we're looking at this today and wanted to go out and benchmark and see where we stand as an industry. So let's take a closer look at reviews first. These patient reviews are absolutely essential to an impactful online presence, and the numbers certainly back that up. 72% of consumers say that positive reviews increase their trust in a local business. 82% of consumers regularly read online reviews before they work with a local business. And then almost 9 out of 10, 88% of those people claim to trust those reviews just as much as personal recommendations from friends and family members. So for me, thinking about why we care and why this matters, these three stats really tell the story of the importance of reviews. First of all, consumers, and in this case, potential patients, they trust reviews. Second, they commonly seek out those reviews. And then third, they're positioned to be perhaps the most influential factor about which provider to choose. For me, when I read this last stat, when somebody shared it with me, it's crazy. We're trusting these comments online from people we've never even met. We're trusting those as more than recommendations from our loved ones, our friends, and family. If nothing else, that alone should give you a feel for just how powerful reviews can be. So as part of this project, we also benchmarked how practices perform in local search from potential patients. And local search is critical to help patients make the connection between those powerful reviews and then booking an appointment. And it's essential that basic details of the practice and what we call NAP information, which is an acronym for name, address, and phone number. It's essential that that information is consistent across the 80 plus existing online directories. Those directories are accessed by more than 150 million people per month. And so when you have inconsistencies in these listings or even slight variations, that can cause you valuable search engine rankings, which are just absolutely critical to getting you more website visits, more conversions. So practices who want to acquire new patients and better retain their current ones in hopes of increasing production and revenue, you simply have to have strong reviews and accurate contact information in those local listings to really compete online and attract that business. So that's kind of the setup for the project. Now, how did we approach it? So back in July of this year, the MyAdvice team took a look at roughly 11,000 or 10,783 to be exact, U.S. dental and dental specialty practices. And the results were, we have a proprietary software that our engineering team built that helped us gather and tabulate the results. But then we also took a look at any specific practices data that just didn't pass the sniff test. It seemed to be super fishy. It maybe had a wildly high number or was clearly off for some reason. So the machine data kind of or the machine we built there took care of most of it, but then we did do a scan on it just to see if anything, didn't pass the sniff test, as I would say. So we do an additional case-by-case review of those outlier data points, the ones that really stood out, and then we make a judgment call whether to include or exclude that case from the results. So I'm going to define the metrics here because they're important as we kind of look through the data. And the main four we've got here are the following. So one is review score. So on this is what we talked about a minute ago. On a scale of 1 to 5, this is the average number of stars a practice has from its collection of patient reviews. Review volume. So that's defined as the number of patient reviews a practice has, specifically on its Google My Business profile. That was the platform that was used to assess that. Review recency. So this one, probably pretty self-explanatory, but I'll explain real quick. It's the amount of time between when the study was done of a practice's reviews and their most recent review. So if in July you hadn't had a review since April, it was roughly about a 90-day review recency there. So you'll see that come up. And then local accuracy score. So this is over on the local listing side of things. This is the percentage of time, so out of 100, the percentage of time that accurate information is displayed for your business when searches happen for that practice across online directories. And one of the goals here was to give you in the data is to give you a reference point for yourself and for your own practice. So I hope you can use the data to understand how you compare relative to your competition, and hopefully as your wheels start turning and you're thinking through this, identify potential areas of focus for you to go make improvements. So what insights did the data reveal, and why do they matter to you as a dental practice? That's the key element of what we want to do here today. Help you think about why each particular insight is important to you in your practice. And we'll start with reviews. So key insight number one with reviews is a 4-star review isn't as good as you might think. And the data point that supports this is the 10th. When we laid out all 11,000-ish practices and just lined them up according to review score, 4.0 is actually the 10th percentile. So when we asked right at the beginning about what is your average review score, and I think we're not too far off here because no one said they were less than a 4.0 out of everyone who responded. So we ask generally we would think a 4-star review is pretty good. That's 4 out of 5. But what this data is telling us is in the highly competitive dental industry, a 4-star review actually works against you. If you had a 4.0 average across the board, you'd only be right here in the 10th percentile. So another way, the mirror way to think about that is 90% of practices, and these are the same practices who are competing for both, your potential patients and your current patients. 90% of them are to the right, have an average review score above a 4.0. So a 4-star review simply isn't good enough. So the goal here should be to capture as many 5-star reviews as possible. The 4 is just, isn't as good as you might think. So when you get a 4, it takes, just from a statistical standpoint, you got to have a lot of 5s to offset that 4 and push it up. So, it really is important to make sure we're driving as much volume as possible. What we also saw in the data, and this is if you go back one, this is the same graph. I'm just highlighting a different point here, is that a 5-star average is not uncommon. And we saw that a little while ago with our own poll we did. I think roughly about 20% of you, if memory serves, said that you have a 5-star average in your practice, or 20% of you who knew, which is great. And it's actually a little lower than what we found across all 11,000, and that was that 37% of practices have a 5.0 average. So if you're among that 37%, hey, good for you. Well done. You're doing great. Everyone else has work to do to match those high scores. And so, while any lingering reviews of 4 or below, they sort of impede that chase toward the 5. One strategy, and it goes back to the last slide too, is just to at least make sure you have a steady wave of recent and high scoring reviews coming in from patients. So make sure you've got that process dialed in. Not only will this help push any of those subpar reviews further down for prospective patients who are reviewing them, just from a recency standpoint, you'll push those down, so to speak, but you'll also continue to boost your overall score north toward a 5. But I thought this was pretty interesting that I didn't expect to see that over a third of practices would have a solid 5-star average. So well done to those of you who are in that group. So where does that leave the rest of us? Well, most practices average between 4 and 5 stars, and again, we saw that just a few minutes ago in our own poll of this group. It's a little over half. So 53% of practices have an average score somewhere between 4 and 5 stars, and so what that means is you've got roughly a third of practices at the 5.0 mark, and the bottom 10% are below a 4.0. You just, how do you stand out? You can't be satisfied kind of lingering in the middle here with a score in the low 4s. So if you think about your marketing strategy and how you're going to attract new business, and you really you believe that reviews are a way to stand out from the crowd and not merely keep pace, it's critical that we're thinking about strategies and approaches to push that average score as high as possible. And we absolutely should be thinking of this as a way to go win new patients. There's some of the data behind that earlier, how influential they are in decision making, how important, how trusted they are versus even recommendations from our friends and our family. Anything we can do to push toward the 5 should be helpful. But hopefully, knowing where you're at, you can kind of see where you stand among the group right here on this graphic. So none of us said in the poll said we were below a 4, and that's not uncommon. I mean, that's again, that's only 10% are down in that pile and in that group. So hopefully interesting to you to see how the industry stands overall. All right, so let's talk about review volume a little bit. So we've been talking about average scores, but how many reviews do we have? So the midpoint for average review volume, so if you're kind of looking left to right on your screen, that midpoint is 37 reviews. That's right in the middle of all the practices. 37 is the magic number right there. But what it tells us, I mean, for me overall, that takeaway is that overall review volume is pretty low. So you have a real opportunity to move ahead of the pack just by increasing your focus on asking more patients to leave reviews. And one way to think about this is just, think about your average weekly patient volume. And who knows what it is for you. Everyone's going to have a different number. But if you could get only 10% of those patients, so 1 out of every 10 of them in any given day, to leave a review for the practice, how many would that be on a weekly basis? And how long would it take you to, if you're below the 37, the 37 reviews, and statistically speaking, half of you guys are, how long, if you were able to just get 1 out of 10 to do it, how long would it take you to rise above that midpoint, get past the 37 and even get up into triple digits? Because some, the 90th percentile, some practices really knock this out of the park. The top 10% are up over 250. So I thought this was pretty interesting. It really, the ones who are doing it well are doing it really well. And then there are some on the lower end where either the strategy doesn't work or it just hasn't been a focus. But hopefully we're making the case for why it's important and why it's worth the attention. Now it's just about getting the strategy in place. And that's the next insight I want to speak to. This is the same data, but just taking a different look at it. We talked about it's low overall, with that midpoint being 37, but review volume among some practices is really low. So 25%, so a quarter of us have fewer than 10 reviews. And why is that so low? Again, that's most likely some combination of a lack of prioritizing reviews and the other part of that combination being just not having a dialed-in process for how to do it or being intentional about doing it. And so if you're one of the practices that falls into this lower quartile, now is the time to test a new approach. If staffing bandwidth is an issue, look into tools that can automate this process. My point of view is you have nothing to lose. If you have fewer than 10 today, you really have nothing to lose from a volume standpoint, but you have a lot to gain. They're highly influential. You can drive your average score up. You have a ton to gain and really nothing to lose right here. All right, a correlation here we found: no practice with more than 500 reviews, and there are a bunch of them, has an average rating below 4. There's a positive correlation between review volume and average score. And in basic terms, the more reviews a practice gathers, the higher their average score becomes. Practices with 500 reviews, they only really represent the top 2% here, but that focus on review volume is working in their favor in terms of their average score. So again, the lesson for everyone else: be more intentional about asking patients for reviews. If you're not doing it today, the odds are you're most likely leaving 5-star reviews on the table or in the chair, if you want to use that metaphor. The good news is that you're likely caring for patients very well today, and you just need to improve the process or maybe even just have the confidence to ask for those reviews. All right, another key insight. So now we're moving to review recency. And again, this is the amount of time between since a practice has gotten its most recent reviews. And admittedly, this is a static point in time. This is as of July when we ran the numbers. But 2 in 3 dental practices have not, at that point, had not seen a new review in over a month. So, the flip or the more direct or more descriptive piece of this is 69% of practices had 0 new reviews in the last 30 days. And we didn't ask that as a poll question, but if just think about yourself here. And if you fall into this group, ask yourself why. I mean, certainly you would welcome any new review that comes your way. So why would there be such a gap since the patient last raved about your practice in an online review? As is the case with low review volume in general, this recency gap, I think it can be tied to just, again, a lack of prioritization and then a lack of a really dialed in process around asking patients to leave reviews. Remember, we didn't hit on this one here. It's a different stat here. Studies show that 70% of consumers will leave a review if you just ask them, especially if it's easy and convenient for them to do so. So make it a simple process on both sides of the equation. Make it a simple process for both your patients and for your staff, and you'll maintain a fresh set of reviews for prospective patients to see as they research your practice. That recency in reviews certainly helps build trust there, and also showcases that you don't have a stagnant online presence, and not having one in the last 30 days is certainly pushing toward that end. All right, key insights with local listings. So again, we're shifting gears here away from reviews and over into the how you appear and your accuracy in local directory listings. So what we found after running it again across 11,000 practices is only 1 in 9 have what we would call accurate local directory listings, and we had to set a threshold for what's considered accurate. And in this case, it was anything above 75, meaning 75 or more percent of the time, all the information in a directory listing that pops up is correct. Again, that's that NAP information, name, address, phone number, and other data points too, website URLs, etc. The majority, only 11%, had a local accuracy score that's above 75. So the other 89 are below that. For the majority of practices, search engine results are returning contact information it's inaccurate in some way. And it's problematic for two reasons. One is inconsistent information confuses Google and confuses Bing and whatever search engine, and it negatively impacts rankings when patients are searching for providers. So it's, there's the robots side of it, right? That Google being able to be on the same page with who you are and what you do and how a patient can get in touch. Second, and perhaps more important, is the actual patient experience is impacted. For example, if a patient sees your practice in their search and they try to call the practice and the phone number there isn't the right one to get an invalid phone number, that's a terrible first impression, and it just makes them much more likely to move on to another provider. And we don't want that. I mean, we've got them right there in the moment. They're ready to contact you. They're ready to make a call. We don't want to do anything to tempt them or make it easy for them to just, click and call a different number. So anything we can do to keep that cleaned up is to our advantage. And 89% of us aren't what we would call accurate, and that's the kind of thing that there are services that can clean that up for you really easily and keep it maintained. Geographic Insights. So this is where we wanted to take a look and just see how things compare based on population density. If, when you're in a highly concentrated area with lots of competing practices, do these things change, these different numbers? And here's one of the insights we found. One was that local accuracy suffers the most within more competitive areas. So if you look at the average local accuracy score, again, it's 1 out of 100. Among all practices, the average is about a 51.5%. For those who fall in what we would consider to be the top 20 metro areas in the United States, that number is 17% lower. It's actually in the low 40s. So this is an interesting insight to data, because in highly populated areas where there's theoretically more competition among you guys to acquire and retain patients, I think the importance of having accurate information in the directory listings it's amplified. It's more important that we do that. The negative SEO impact of outdated or incomplete information, it risks pushing you further down the search engine rankings. And in a consumer decision-making environment where 3/4 of searchers, they never even make it past the first page of results, having those inaccurate listings, it's a risk that a growing practice, especially if you're in one of these highly competitive areas, it's just a risk that you can't afford to take. So I thought this was really interesting. I expected, when we were going to evaluate this, I expected this to be the opposite. I thought we would see, because it's more highly competitive, because they're more in the area, that there would be more focus and attention on this, and the data tells us otherwise, that in those more competitive areas, average local accuracy is actually lower. But it's a huge opportunity to get that cleaned up and get that changed. Review volume is actually 1/3 lower within more competitive areas. So again, we're looking at the U.S. as a whole versus just those practices who fall in what we call the top 20 metro areas. Average review volume is 33% lower. So and this is not a midpoint. This is an average, like a mean. If you guys remember those statistics classes, among all practices, it's 98, with the upper crust of that really driving the average higher. But in the top 20 metros areas, it's down to 66 on average. And again, it's surprising, because you would think in a more competitive area, there should be an even greater emphasis on gathering more reviews from patients. It's one of the most powerful marketing tools a practice can leverage to stand out and attract new patients. But you know, I was thinking about this in a different way. You know, this could just be a testament to the strong results from less densely populated areas of the country. You know, those groups as well have continued to embrace the power of patient reviews and think through how to put in good strategies to more effectively generate them for their practices. So maybe it's not so much that we're not great in the top 20 metro areas as we are just getting better at it across the board. So I have to keep myself in check there. So the last set of insights I wanted to share with you is really just more for fun. I thought you would find this interesting. So we took those different you know, stats that we looked at and breakdowns, and we just looked at it on a state-by-state basis in the U.S. And this was a fun exercise because we got to see, A, do we remember where every state is when we're coloring a map? And B, it just felt like I was going back to grade school, which was a lot of fun. But with average review scores, the Mountain West, it loves its dentists. So I'm one of those. I'm here in Park City, Utah. But Wyoming, Idaho, Utah, Montana, they're all placing it in the top 5 for average review scores. And lowest there, and we don't know why, this is just the data, is Vermont, Hawaii, and Mississippi. So congratulations to those of you who are in the Mountain West, and you should be proud, but probably still room to improve. When we look at so that was scores, average volume on a per practice basis. So this was interesting too. Again, you know, don't really know what to expect here, but New Mexico's dental patients, they like to rave about their care experiences. And on the lower end is Mississippi here, with West Virginia and Maine coming in behind those. Just on a per practice basis, this is the average number of reviews we've seen. And then the last one we were able to tease out of the data was around local directory listings. And we're the most dialed in from a NAP information standpoint in South Dakota. South Dakota's there. Utah, I'm proud to say, is there again. Vermont, Iowa, and Washington, all in the highest part, all more than 50% accurate on average. The bottom 5, all below 50% accurate on average. California, the most problematic here. And, you know, that could be tied to some of the larger a handful of the larger metro areas being in California, and what we saw, you know, how those numbers were lower. Indiana, Ohio, which also has some large metro areas, Wyoming, and then Florida, which does as well. So so that's how the states perform in terms of accuracy of local directory listings. Again, not a whole lot for you to take away here, but just fun stuff that pops up in the data that I wanted to share. So that's what we learned. That's what we found. But I wanted to recap a little bit and just kind of go through some what does it all mean. Number one point that I think is good to walk away from today is, you know, asking yourself, do you know what your average review score is today? About half of you didn't when we did the poll, and I'm not review score shaming you, but it's just worth looking into and knowing where you stand, because it's really important. It's really influential, and the data increasingly tells us so. Every time we refresh data around, you know, how important these are in consumer buying decisions, the percentages get higher and higher. So the question to ask yourself regarding your review score is, well, what are you doing to drive new reviews and to improve that score today? Another question to ask is what's your average daily patient volume? So we talked about this when we were talking about review volume, right? What's your average daily patient volume? And how many reviews would that mean if you got a 10% response rate to requests? We've, you know, MyAdvice, we work with some practices on their reviews, and we typically see about a 10% response rate. What would that mean if you had that process and had that tool and that strategy dialed in and in place? How quickly could you move the needle on your review volume? A third question to ask is, how are you ensuring you keep a steady stream of fresh new reviews coming in? And it's kind of we talked a little bit about, a blend of making it a priority and then making sure the process is there. Prioritization and process. How are you making reviews and soliciting reviews part of your staff's and your practice's regular routine? And then the last question I hope you would ask and just kind of take away and think about is, have you spent time going through your listings to make sure, again, this is on the local directory side, have you gone through those listings to make sure they're up to date? I mean, they're all over the place, and there are services that can help you scan for this and make that easier. But aside from that, have you spent the time going through those to make sure they're up to date? Or do you even know where all they exist, where all those spots are, where patients are potentially finding you? It may be that, there's a bad phone number and they say, forget it, I'll move on to someone else. Or where the robots, as I like to say, may be, pushing you further down the rankings because there's confusion and some of the, your name or your address, your phone number are inconsistent and inaccurate. So questions to ask yourself there. With that, I want to make sure you have the code for the CE credit today, and that code is ADVICE, ADVICE. Screenshot that if you want to. Write it down real quick. I'll come back and put that on the screen in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to encourage you to keep learning, keep reaching out to us. We're doing more of this research. Would love to, if you'd love to talk about your review process and your review strategy and what opportunities you have to improve there, go to myadvice.com and the contact us page and let us know, or you can drop me an email, justin.everett@myadvice.com. Well, also, as you're exiting the session here in a few minutes, there'll be a survey question come up, and if you'd love to have a conversation or a consultation there on that front, based on how you think about your results today and what you learned today, let us know, and happy to have somebody connect with you. But with that said, that wraps up the webinar. Thanks for attending. Thanks for participating and sharing your own results in the poll questions there. That was super helpful, and interesting that we were, a smaller group. We were right there with the 11,000 we polled at large. So I hope you found it useful and maybe even kind of fun. And we'll hope to see you at the next MyAdvice webinar. And I'll leave the advice CE code on the screen for just a few more minutes. But with that, we'll wrap up and we'll see you next time. Thank you.